The history of this iconic venue dates back to 1945, when by a decree of the National Council, the state enterprise Polish Film was established with Aleksander Ford as its first director. 4 years later, the production department was divided into 3 specialized units: the Documentary Film Studio, which was located in Warsaw, the Educational Film Studio in Łódź, and the legendary Feature Films Studio in Łódź. For almost half a century, the Lodz Feature Films Studio was the largest film center in the country. All of the most important films and series of the past era were made here. An immeasurable amount of scenery, costumes, props were created. Many hundreds kilometers of film were stored. The biggest names of Polish cinema of the time were meeting here. During the best years, over 20 titles each year were shot here, and there was a time where 8 films were shot simultaneously in the production company's halls, laboratories, and recording studios. At first, an existing sports hall on Łąkowa Street, which had existed since 1938, was adapted to meet the needs of the factory. Soon, 2 more shooting halls were added, and the necessary workshop, including carpentry, stucco, painting, and tailor's workshop, were located at the back. The first production at the studio, and at the same time the first post-war Polish feature film, was Zakazane Piosenki, Forbidden Songs from 1946, directed by Leon Buczkowski. Alan Starski, the production designer and later Oscar winner for the film Schindler's List, mentioned that when he was a young boy, his father, who was a screenwriter, took him to the set of Forbidden Songs. The film was supposed to show Warsaw before the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. The whole decoration was created in the background of the studio because the capital city was really in ruins at that time. This setting made such an impression on the young Starski that he stopped dreaming of becoming a locomotive engine driver and began to think more respectfully about the work of filmmakers. In 1953, the first Polish color film, Przygoda na Mariensztacie, An Adventure in Marienstadt, directed by Leonard Buczkowski, was produced at the studio, and for the purpose of this film, the entire Marienstadt market was recreated. Among the Oscar-winning filmmakers associated with the studio, we should mention the long-time director of the studio, Aleksander Ford, author of The Knights of the Teutonic Order from the 1960, the Polish candidate for an Oscar in 1960 with no nomination, however. It has been claimed that there would be no cinematic Łódź without Ford. In 1940s, he organized the film headquarters of the 1st Division for the Polish Army, as well as produced didactic and training films for the army. Thanks to him, it was possible to bring equipment from Berlin's Babelsberg to the nascent studio, allowing it to start making films from the very beginning. There is a rather surprising story connected to the Knights of the Teutonic Order. When in February 1960, one of the outdoor scenes needed to be filmed, instead of looking for real wilderness, the crew moved just a few hundred meters from the studio to that part of the nearby Poniatowski Park where Mickiewicza Street runs today. In this place, Zbyszko, played by Mieczysław Kalenik, coming back from Bogdaniec to the Mazowian court, rescues Jurand and his men buried in a snowstorm on their way to Ciechanów. One of the biggest undertakings of the studio was the production of the film Pharaoh by Jerzy Kawalerowicz. Some of the shots were made in Egypt, but the cost of building decorations there would have been too high. It was much cheaper to make it in the Soviet Union, and so the Kizil-Kum desert in present-day Uzbekistan was chosen for the construction of the Pharaoh's palace and the Ptah temple. The construction of the decorations was led by an excellent production designer from the Łódź Film Studio, Jerzy Skrzepiński. Thanks to his written memoirs, we have quite a lot of information about how the whole process went. Thousands of props for the soldiers of the extras alone, 1,500 bows had to be prepared, costumes and wigs were created in the set design studios in Łódź and then needed to be transported to the set, which was 6,000 kilometers away. Skrzepiński recalled that at first he traveled to Egypt for a 2-month dossier, during which he was supervised by Professor Kazimierz Michałowski, a great celebrity and legend of Polish archaeology. Skrzepiński was most interested in what he could see and even touch in the museum warehouses. Into a special bag made of goat skin, he collected fragments of marble, sandstone, unaware that the export of this type of material is treated as theft in Egypt. He was rescued from the hands of customs officers at the airport by the authority of Professor Michałowski, who announced that these were the necessary samples needed for the construction of the scenery. Talking about his life, the stage designer recalled Pharaoh as the greatest adventure of his life. The studio also produced The Deluge, Potop by Jerzy Hoffman in 1974, The Promised Land by Andrzej Wajda in 1974, and Night and Days by Jerzy Antczak in 1975. All of those three titles, year after year, earned nominations for the most important American Film Award, which is the Oscar. In 1983, Zbigniew Rybczyński's film Tango won an Oscar, and although the studio of small film forms SEMA 4 was responsible for its production, it was here that the Blue Room, where the life cycle of all the characters takes place, was arranged. It was a great success and the first Oscar for a Polish filmmaker, although there was a silence in the country around the award, which was caused due to the fact that during the speech expressing his thanks, Rybczyński expressed his hope that he would still have an opportunity to speak from this place someday for the occasion of his planned film that tells the story of Lech Wałęsa and Solidarity. In the political reality of the time, this could not be accepted. The studio was the Hollywood of Łódź. It was staffed by passionate people who loved film. Moreover, that also involved traveling and meeting many interesting people connected with the industry. Each production was a new challenge to which the creators put some of their talent and commitment. And life also flourished in the bars located on the studio grounds. When someone was good in relations with the buffet lady, she might even get scrambled eggs for breakfast instead of the miserable mincemeat. The political changes of the late 1980s brought the first signs of crisis, while the 1990s saw the end of the power of the label. An attempt to save the WFF was the establishment of the Łódź Film Center, which took over the studio's assets and eventually moved from Łąkowa to Obywatelska Street. Today, it deals only with the rental of costumes and props. Today, film and TV stories are still happening in the halls of Łąkowa Street. It is the headquarters of the digital TV provider Toya, which includes the Toya Studios sound studio. At Łąkowa Street, you will also find the Łódź branch of the National Film Archive, which archives a rich collection of film materials. However, from the perspective of our walk, the most relevant resident of the former studio is the independent production company Opus Film. It is in fact Opus Film that is responsible for the greatest achievements of Polish cinema abroad in recent years: the Oscar-winning Ida 2013 and the Oscar-nominated Cold War 2018, both directed by Paweł Pawlikowski.